Hi, good evening. My name is Jay Rothman, and welcome to Real People, Real Stories Live. I'd like to welcome my guest this evening. I am honored, humbled, and excited, all wrapped into one, to introduce my guest this evening, Jamie Rodriguez. Welcome to Real People, Real Stories Live, coming in from, I believe, somewhere in Miami, Florida.
Pleasure's all mine, Jay. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Well, it's just a couple of 24 hours ago that you and I were introduced by one of my friends and co-hosts of my other show, Real Men, Real Talk Live, Jeff Fasano, who actually had been a guest. He was interviewed on your platform, on your podcast, and made the introductions. And ever since then, you and I have really connected almost on a weekly basis, just to touch base, talk about the different things in life that come out of some of the shows that we do. And just give a little bit of background on you. Jamie Rodriguez is a former music journalist and a radio personality. You're planning on sharing how you have built a successful podcast with the who's who in the music industry, and also touch base a little bit on your divorce and how that's impacted your life, and some massive changes even perhaps that are coming down the pike that you're facing before 2020 comes to an end. But first and foremost, I'd love for you to share with the viewers and audience a little bit about yourself, and you can just kind of go down memory lane and go where you'd like to start, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, Jay, thanks. Well, that's a great intro. Thanks for that. Yeah, look, it's been a pleasure to connect with you and with Jeff and this year. And I think that I've always had a passion to connect with people. I've always found that people are really interesting. Everyone has something very interesting to say, whether they are the most famous celebrity in the world, like Shakira or whatever, or whether it's someone out on the street. Everyone has something that we can learn from. And I think that's from very young age. I think that I've always fed on that. And that's what kind of pushed me to radio. And it's kind of guided me throughout my life. And now to this podcast, that's taken off this year, Jay.
It's interesting. As children, we all are introduced to music at a relatively young age. But not everybody becomes a radio personality or even a music journalist. What was it about the industry that got you hooked, that led you to pursuing somewhat of a career?
That's a good question, Jay. I think there were a couple moments in my life when I was, growing up, seminal moments in my life that really it empowered me to the power of music, that I understood that music was more than entertainment, that I understood that music could really bring people together to another level. And I think that the two moments were, one of them was on May 2nd of 1997. I was still in Bogota, Colombia, where I was born. And Colombia was, the context is, Colombia was in the middle of like a civil war. It's not what it is now. It was, the drug wars were going on. It was a very nasty place. Hence why my family ended up moving. But the point being that there were no musical acts that would go to Colombia. It was too dangerous. It was too taboo. It was too much. And there was one band that decided to go at its worst, and that band was San Francisco's Metallica. And I pleaded to my parents. I was like 12 years old. I pleaded them, please let me go. Metallica had this reputation for being, like a metal head situation. I don't know how, but I ended up going. And it was a transformative moment for the country. I think 100,000 people showed up, which is still a record. And the band still talks about that night as one of the best shows of their life. I'll just never forget it. At 12 years old, that moment just completely just rewired me. I keep going back to that moment.
Wow.
Yeah.
And
there were tears all over the whole thing. Yeah.
So now your family moves to the U.S. and music was just part of who you are, or what was your what was your own personal relationship with music? I mean, was it like a 24/7 thing? Was it always a huge part of your life as you were maturing? And when did you know you wanted to get into on a radio personality side?
Yeah, sure. So the second moment was when we moved, and a couple years after 9/11 happened, right? And also, like, that was a moment where I understood like how music brought this country together. I always loved this country, which I'm honored and grateful to be a citizen of now. But I always had a soft spot in my heart from when I vacationed as a kid for this country, and when 9/11 happened, I felt like music really helped the country heal. If you remember those like next couple months, like U2 is my favorite band, and they played the first Super Bowl after, and they had the backdrop with the names of all the victims of the planes, Flight 97, whatever, and John Smith, the whole thing. It was all these moments. Just they just like, it was like, okay, music is like deep. Music is like music is what makes humanity come alive. That's how I got it, basically. Yeah. And then to answer your second question, the radio part. Yeah, I always, parallel to that, I always like to communicate. I always like to, whether it was the yearbook committee in school, or whether it was the the morning middle school news. I like to be part of that. With broadcasting while I was for lunch to the student body of the middle school, and all those things. I always like to communicate. I always like to share my thoughts and my ideas with people. So I think those two things just converged.
Beautiful, beautiful. Now, growing up in a home where your heritage, your culture, no doubt, I'm sure, has played a major role in your upbringing and your belief system and all. Kind of touched on that the other night in Real Men, Real Talk Live about cultures and how we're impacted, how we show up in our life because of our cultures.
Yeah.
How has your culture impacted the choices you've made in your life as an adult, specifically today? And what's worked, and what are there any parts that have been challenging for you where you've perhaps maybe felt somewhat restricted at all, or where you wanted to be able to spread your wings and fly? Has it been a blessing or a burden, or somewhere in between for you?
That's a good question, Jay. I think it's been both. More blessing. I would say definitely more blessing. I'm blessed with very loving parents. I come from I've been lucky to have a stable family, and loving cousins and uncles, and I had a nice childhood. So I did have a lot of love growing up. But Hispanic culture is very conservative in many ways, and that works for good and for bad. I think that the country, when it comes to values, I think that the country, there's a big discrepancy between the upper class and the lower class in this country. So when you belong to the privileged, you stick to what works culturally in the circle, because that's just what everyone in the country, how it works. So that has its good. The good is that you have some intrinsic values of stability, of love, of you have some financial discipline that's instilled in you. You're expected to go to college. Like going to college is like, it's like you're expected to go to at least get a bachelor's. You're expected to walk a conservative path in life that will at least get you somewhere, like a good place. So these are the good things. um, you're not going to go off the rails, or it's very hard, basically. The problem is that this model also plays it safe, basically. It's very conservative by definition, so it's restricted. It's like a box. um, you know little you won't lose too much, but you won't gain too much either. It's kind of like somewhere in the middle. um, and then when my family moved to the US, you know that was a big moment for my parents specifically, because my parents loved America, and they do, and they love America, and we love America. But America is all about individual freedoms. America is all about the entrepreneurial spirit, the man on the moon, Google in Silicon Valley, the gold rush of the 1849ers or whatever. That's what America is. So I think that for 20 years since my family's been here, it's been that that balancing act, that tide wiring act of how do we, from my family perspective, of how do we keep that safety net and that base that we were raised on, and that we raised our children on, but at the same time let them kind of live an American dream of sorts. So it's been that balancing act. So it's been a little yin yang. It's been a little restrictive. So there you go.
So do you, let me ask you this. Have you danced your way through those restrictions? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's been a Cirque du Soleil kind of hoop dancing.
Yeah,
You
I
know.
get it. I understand that. Sean Cudahy, welcome. Thank you for joining us this evening. He is the host of his own podcast called Room 9. And he says music is such an incredible tool. It was the only thing that got me through my siblings dying when I was 15 years old. Sean and I have traded. We've both been on each other's podcasts, but this is such a powerful, powerful statement that he shared. I could tell you, Jamie, that music's been a huge part of my own healing journey. Over the past 5 years, I found music, and again, I had really lost my relationship with music over the years. It just kind of dissolved. And especially in a house with a wife and three kids, and everyone trying to control let's call it the station or the song. I tended to kind of take a seat back and not have that, pick and choose my battles. And that was one that I didn't think was important enough. So it wasn't until I, let's say, broke free of my own parameters around my restrictive life that I had been living. And when I made the choices to make changes in my life, one of the first things that happened was I found music again. Nice. And the interesting thing was, it wasn't the typical music that I may have listened to in the past. It was very different. But it's been such a huge part, such a huge, powerful tool. And so, yeah, it's definitely a great tool for anyone on any type of healing journey, or wanting to connect with themselves, or just kind of let their guard down, whether we sing, whether we dance. When I was living in Huntington Beach, a matter of fact, I used to have my music on a little speaker on my beach cruiser, and I'd be riding 10, 20, 30 miles every morning, and I'd be singing my music. And I didn't know it until about 2 years later. I was about to leave the beach, and I found out indirectly that people had named me the Music Man. I had no idea. Literally.
That's cool.
And most people enjoyed the music, but not everybody did. That's okay. I respect that, no doubt. I'd like to kind of transition into the last couple of years. If I recall, you were together with your wife for about 8 years, married for 5, and you recently went through a divorce. I'd like to invite you to share with the viewers and myself, what did you learn about yourself in your marriage and as you exited out of the marriage? What have you learned about yourself that you didn't know before you stepped into that commitment?
Well, I think that, on your other show, I think on your Real Men, Real Talk Live, by the way, fantastic show. People should check it out. But I think you talk a lot about playing sometimes adult, and how we play these roles sometimes that we are not. Maybe you can correct me, like maybe prepared or mature enough to actually do. So we pretend.
Okay.
And I think that going into the marriage, I got married when I was 26, and there was a lot of playing husband, or what I thought it should be, playing adult, playing what I thought I had to be, a good all-American husband, if you will. I married a great woman, but she had some expectations about what marriage was going to be, coming from a blue-collar town, blue-collar values. So I became that. To what I thought was gonna have a successful marriage, without realizing that what I was doing it was poisoning it from the very beginning.
Tell me more. Well, now,
Sure.
let me ask you this, if you don't mind. Was your wife also from Colombia descent, or was she American?
American, Italian family, Italian-American family, from Northeast Ohio. There's a big Italian.
Okay.
But there are some shared values there, Jay, when it comes to family. Italians, the only people whose families are more close-knit than Hispanics are Italians. They say that, Italians live with their parents until they get married, and then they move, and then when they finally get married, they move on to another floor in the same building or something like that.
Yeah.
So there are some similarities, and the religion was a similarity. So there were some similarities, but she was American, yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So on the back end now I know some of these questions I ask at any time, Jamie, if you're not comfortable answering them, you could set a boundary with me and I will absolutely respect you. But I am curious, what do you know? What have you learned about yourself now that you didn't know when you were in it? Just anything come to mind?
A lot, absolutely, a lot. I mean, the first. And this is probably so cliche, and it sounds so obvious now when I say it. It's like duh, but it's like, man, like be true to yourself. Don't compromise who you are for anybody, even if it's your spouse or your husband or your partner or whoever, because ultimately, you are going to be less fulfilled. And if you're going to be less fulfilled, you're going to be a shittier partner. And that's and it's going to create like a cycle. So, I learned that, don't hide who you really are. I learned, I probably learned also like the importance of dating. And let me rephrase that a little bit, Jay. I mean, we dated for a good amount of time, but I thought that I think we didn't go deeper in the dating process because we had this end goal in mind of the marriage, and we were traveling and doing these like cool little things and the photos of the happy couple. And instead of maybe finding out like, hey, what are your core driving forces? Is it significance? Is it giving? Is it risk? I mean, some people love risk. Some people love to shoot themselves off parachutes and bungee jump. So if you're one of those, then are you going to get along with someone whose main driving force is safety? No, you're not, right? The same with money, the same with, and I think that that's where one of our values, one of our top core values, the core values, the ones that you can't change, was off. And that when we realized that is when, yeah.
Wow, I love what you just shared, because, well, two things that stand out for me. One is that, remember the old game show, The Dating Game?
Yeah.
Well, if you think about it, not about the game, not about the actual show, but about those two words, dating game. It really, for so many people, as you described it, it's more about going out, having fun, the and it's not always really getting to know one another. I refer to it as vetting. Before we get into a lot of business transactions, we're supposed to vet. We're supposed to vet, make sure that it's a good fit. And if you and your potential partner or wife or husband, you're out there just gallivanting around and traveling and having fun and experience, doing all the things that keep you in that oxytocin state of being, and you're really not having those hard, honest conversations, getting to know the core values that are important to you. I could tell you that I had never, ever, I was married for 30 years, and I stepped out of that marriage back in 15, but I never knew about something called the love languages. I had no idea that there's actually, there's 5 love languages. There's a book about it. And you don't have to buy the book if you want it. It's a great book to read, and also read if when you're in a new relationship with someone, to really understand not only what their love languages are, but what are your top love languages, so that it's a great way to get insight on each other, so that when you're in a relationship, you both can make sure that you're honoring what's important, what you both need. I didn't know that. I wish I had awareness of that when I was in my marriage, because it may have been an opportunity to improve areas of a relationship that we didn't understand each other, and that caused a block in the marriage. But having said that, it's a great tool for people to embrace, understand, not only with a potential partner, but also in all relationships. When we could start to understand what someone's love language is, even if it's a friendship, it can change the quality of the friendship. Because once I understand what's important to you, of the 5 love languages, what's your top, then I can actually put in an effort. I can have awareness and be conscious to speak your language that really fills you at your heart space. So it's a really cool thing to check out. Have you heard of the love languages before?
I did learn of it a little too late.
Uh-huh.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, me too.
Mm-hmm.
Well, maybe it was too late for that relationship, but you got a whole life ahead of you, and nothing but beautiful opportunities, infinite opportunities. So pretty cool. Once we understand it, and I still use it in my life today. I embrace it today more than I did 5 years ago. I pay attention to what I need, and if I'm not getting my needs met, then I also have the opportunity to kind of bring that up in an intimate conversation,
Right.
and let that person know, hey, I'm kind of needing some of this right now. That doesn't mean I'm advocating that we become needy in our relationships. It's more about expressing what we need, what we desire, what's important to us, so that we can honor one another in a relationship. Moving right along, I'd like to kind of fast forward. So now you've gotten divorced. Just in 2020, something happened for you. You decided to launch your own podcast. What was your driver for that? What was any fear of doing that? Was there fear, so on and so forth? Why don't you tell us a little bit about what that experience was before you launched your podcast?
Yeah. I think the podcast launched in April, and Jay, it came, when the marriage was like just in its final stages, in the paperwork stages or whatever, and it came very automatically. It came very instinctively. It felt like I had all this pent up stuff that I had blocked for years, and it just like gushed out. There was no fear, Jay. There was no. I was fearless. Now, because obviously I spent many years in radio, so I knew I could do it. I knew how to like play the game, like the production game. I mean, stuff has changed. Now it's the podcasting, and now instead of going to a big clunky studio to produce, you can produce in your laptop. So the things, the way it has changed, but overall the concept is the same. So it was just like going back to what I loved, and it just like by instinct I was like, okay, this is over. Let's go back to my true self that I've been hiding for years. And there was no fear. It was the most beautiful thing. It was no fear.
Who was? Do you remember who your first guest was, and how did it feel when you hit go live or when you hit record?
Yeah. My first guest was an American singer-songwriter called Vanessa Peters, who's born in Dallas, but she plays a lot in Europe, and she is kind of got stuck this year in Italy. She's made the best of the situation herself, but yeah, like she was releasing an album, and oh man, I mean, it felt great. Even though the other day I looked back at that interview and it was it was a little clunky, of course, the production, of course, but the questions were really there. The research was there. The lessons that I learned from the Miami radio legend, my mentor back in the day, of preparing were there. So I prepared back and forth her catalog, and it was a very enjoyable chat. And yeah, and it just kind of took off from there. After her, I was able to get a female singer for a female backup musician for Vampire Weekend. That is a very popular indie rock band nowadays. Like they're like headliners at major festivals, Vampire Weekend. So once I got the Vampire Weekend gal, it was like, okay, like this is working. People are reacting positively to it. Let's I still got it. Let's rock and roll.
Beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
From April to now, you have picked up, I believe you're over 20,000 viewers on your Instagram page, I believe, which is quite impressive. Putting the numbers to the side, you've not only do you have, I believe, up and coming musicians of all genres, but you also have had some significant icons join you on your podcast that include Mary Wilson from the Supremes, John Oates, going back to the 60s and 70s, Judy Collins. I don't know if I missed any of the icons, but those are the three that stood out as I scrolled through close to 100 guests that you've interviewed at this time. What was it like for you to sit there and open up the conversation and interview John Oates, Mary Wilson? What was that experience like for you? I'm interested to know, like, in that moment, did you have butterflies? Did you have anxiety, fear? Where were you at in that moment? And what did you get out of that experience? What did you learn about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good question. We do have another quote unquote icon coming up soon. By the way, I'm going to plug it in before the end of the year. We have Andrew Ferris. He's the co-founder of In Excess, the Australian rock band down in the 80s, was very big. Yeah. But yes, to answer your question, I think John Oates was the first one of the group that you mentioned. And yes, at the beginning there was, like, quite frankly, panic when it was like booked, when it was confirmed, and it's like, okay, where do you even begin? But very quickly, because when you start preparing for these people, for Mary Wilson, who has a career that spans 50 plus years.
Yeah,
I think the trick is to not go where everybody else goes, because you're wasting everybody's time, basically. I mean, there's all this documentation and all this stuff that you can ever get out of an interview. So it's like, I think that understanding like, okay, like what does Mary Wilson want to talk about in 2020? What would she want to talk about? And then it goes back to, okay, like her grandkids. What do her grandkids think of her as being a supreme? What do you feel when you're out and about at Target and you hear your songs, buying a gallon of milk? Not how did you meet, how do you feel to be an icon of Motown? Because those questions have been asked 100 times. Same with John Oates. It was like he's got a lot of really good music that has nothing to do with Hall and Oates, but himself as John Oates. A lot of folk and bluegrass that is very underrated. So when you start talking about things that are unique and not everyone asks, then they open up and they love it, and it's great.
What has impressed me about Jamie Rodriguez is that every conversation I've had with you has been real. I haven't once witnessed you showing up with your ego inflated. Why do you think that is?
That's interesting, Jay. I'm very aware of like the ego as the opponent. I always, I have been for a few years now. I think in college I had like an ego problem, and it got me into trouble, relationships. It got me, I wasn't like the most pleasant guy to be around. Actually, probably when I was like in radio, I was kind of, I had a little bit of an ego problem. But eventually, with time, I realized that, ego is just like, it's like the opponent. Ego is fake, and I think that life did knock me out a few times in my own way. And you start realizing that, like, it's how you bounce back. Like ego, like, you owe, like you were talking about the success of the podcast. Like if people didn't listen, if people didn't tune in, then it didn't matter. Then it doesn't matter. So, at the end of the day, it's the guests, it's the people that tune in. It's not me. It's everybody, it's everybody else. And you can never lose sight of that. Never lose sight that the goal is to communicate something for the people, that people are entertained. But yeah, ego, Jay, I mean, it's obviously it creeps up on you every day. It creeps up you every day, but just realizing that ego is fear. When you put it that way, it's like if you're bringing up a lot of ego to the equation, you're just being fearful. You're showing your fear. And, it's life is scary and life is full of challenges, as we've all seen this year. But the point is to embrace that fear, embrace that garbage, not pretend it's not there, because then that becomes the ego problem.
I love that answer, Jamie. I'll tell you, what I've enjoyed in growing my own relationship with you is that it's been a few times where you're one of our biggest fans on my other show, Real Men Real Talk Live. And it's not uncommon for me to receive a private text after the show's over from you. One expressing like a wow, oh, this was incredible. I can't believe what I got out of it. And your enthusiasm, your energy in that moment, even though I'm tired after I produced the show, I've called you in that moment and then talked to you for another 15 minutes to 30 minutes because you're such an amazing student. You have such an open heart. Thank you want more for yourself, from yourself, and you're so open to grow and learn and expand. And I embrace that. I welcome it in my own life. And when I meet someone like you, who's like so taken, so impacted in that moment, so let's say high off the energy of what comes out of that show, that you feel safe enough to reach out to me just to tell me how it impacted you. It's just like, to me, that's why we do what we do. That's why I do what I do. The intention is to connect with people and to touch people in a profound way. that's going to impact their life and impact their relationships for the better. So I just want to take a moment. That's me thanking you for showing up in my life. And how you show up actually inspires me to keep doing what I'm doing. And so thank you for that.
Nice. No, Jay, that's really nice. Thank you so much. But no, I mean, the credit's all yours. The show you have, Real Men, Real Talk Live, which is also for women, it's just people, great people, you, Jeff, and everybody, just Evis and everyone just being open and being vulnerable, and the fans are also bring it. And it's just refreshing to find a place, in today's world where people are like completely calm with their hearts open and being their true selves and being vulnerable. And it's a beautiful place.
I'd like to acknowledge Claire says she's a fan of the JRodconcerts podcast here, and she's got a question for you. She says, how would you encourage someone to rediscover inspiration or passion in their lives, via music or otherwise, if they feel they've lost it? It's a good question. That's a beautiful question.
Mm.
And she's directed it to you, so you're in a hot seat.
How would you encourage
I'm off the hook.
To rediscover inspiration or passion if they feel they've lost it? Yeah. I that's a good question because like I had my passion dormant for a few years, but I don't think I ever lost it now in retrospect. I think it was there, like I was still going to a lot of concerts and I was still listening to a lot of music, and even though my marriage was not supportive of it, like I still needed my fix. Can you ever lose a passion? I think it's part of us, and I think it's more like unpeeling. I think it's just like unpeeling the stuff that we have today as a society, with stress, with rent, with losing your job, with a mortgage, with whatever it may be, that like keeps like blocking us from like blocking this light. But I think I think each one of us has that passion is our core. Whether it's, for some people it's giving, for some people it's giving back, for some people it's music, for some people it may be, race car driving, whatever it may be. I think the point is to just come back to your true self and remove all the distractions and distractions and the shells that are put on by the media, that are put on by the world. Like a lot of noise just blocking us from ourselves.
Yeah, that's a beautiful question and a great answer. It's kind of a segue. She kind of set us up. I want to thank you, Claire, for setting Jamie and I up, because one of the areas we wanted to really dive into tonight is on what is the inner voice, and how can we, what does our inner voice mean? What is it? How do we tap into it? And is the inner voice different than what comes through our thoughts or our mind? So it's a great question to segue really into this part of the interview, Jamie, which is, do you think you found your inner voice? What is your inner voice? How do you tap into it? And how can it guide you in your life, or how has it for you? Have you found your inner voice?
Interesting question. Have I found my inner voice? Yeah. Let me start with the easy part. And the easy answer is that the head voice is not the real voice, and that we can program anything into our heads. And I think that, there's a philosophical saying from Plato or Aristotle, and I'm paraphrasing it obviously, but it's something like, we can program our mind to be passionate about anything, even if it's the falsest of falsehoods. So the mind, I'm very afraid of the mind. Basically, I don't believe in the mind at all. And that's one of the problems I have with like the news. Whatever spectrum of the political side you believe in, it doesn't matter. It's like whatever you put in your mind, you're gonna end up believing, and it affects your emotions and all that. Now, Your inner voice. Oof. That's interesting about the inner voice. Damn. Help me out, Jay.
Okay. The inner voice is what many refer to. We've heard the term trust your gut.
Mm-hmm.
Your gut is where is really the inner voice. Trusting your gut is there's a part of you within yourself that knows what's best for you,
Yeah.
that knows your right answer. When
Yeah.
someone says trust your gut and you don't, and you doubt it, so you erase or you change, you go delete, and you change the answer on
Yeah.
the test, and you put the second answer in, that's usually not the right answer. The first answer was. So the inner voice is the voice of truth.
Right.
It's the voice that is your truth. And what we tend to do is we're not taught how to tap into it. We're not taught in many homes what the true essence of that voice is and what its purpose is. Its purpose is to guide you.
Yeah.
Our inner voice is where our intuition lies. Our inner voice is where our wisdom lives. We are all born with wisdom to a large extent.
Beautiful.
But again, we're not taught how to pay attention, how to quiet either our minds or our voices down enough to listen through meditation, for some through music, for others even through perhaps yoga, writing, reading, just to be a listener,
beautiful.
to tap into it. And because when we're able to turn off our thoughts, which is where the negative ego lives, and we pay attention to our truth, we will find that most, if not all, of our answers we already have. And that's one of the things I'm working on with my own sons in their 20s today, is to invite them to do just that. Like, well, what's your gut tell you? What's your intuition tell you? You know, and then rather than me giving them the answer or giving them my opinion, I first go to, well, what do you think? What's your intuition telling you?
Yeah.
Because if I just stay with what do you think, they're going to go to all the thoughts, and I really don't want to encourage them to live in thoughts. I'd like to encourage my own sons to tap into their truth, into their knowing. Sometimes our knowing is something that we're fearful of.
Yeah.
We don't know how to navigate, how to get there. What could it look like if we follow through on that? So we go to fear, and fear is part of the mind game. And that then becomes all of the reasons why, all the buts.
Yeah.
But all the why we can't, we can't because of
Exactly.
the buts. And that's when we hold ourselves back and we play small.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay. Like, very beautifully said. And, I think now that you put it that way, it's like, yes, absolutely. It's taken me, I'm 34 years old. It's taking me to this point to make big strides in finding my voice, to be honest with you. It's taking me, so I have learned throughout the journey. I didn't know this just like a few years ago. But yeah, a lot of it is the noise. A lot of it, we talked about the family preconditioning. A lot of it is like, I don't want to let my parents down. And then just by putting those limiting beliefs, you're already blocking your inner voice. When you're saying, no, I don't want to move to that city because I've never lived there. I'm comfortable where I am. Like, what if things go wrong? That's a limiting belief. And that's and these limiting beliefs just quiet your gut completely, and then you don't do anything.
And the net result is you're not living your authentic life. You're living a belief system that's created by the fears that you have about all the what ifs could go wrong.
Right.
I remember when I was leaving Huntington Beach, California, Southern California, to move to the desert, Arizona, that is. And bless my mom, I love her heart. I remember I was on the phone with her. I was literally driving. I believe I was already driving across the state line. And she said, well, but you loved California. I mean, there's so many miracles that unfolded for me. reversed a lot of health conditions and really, really straightened out my life. And it all happened at the beach. And she's like, what's that going to look like for you? And I remember I said to her, Mom, it's okay for me to say I don't know. I don't have to know what the outcome's going to be. I just have to be willing to have the experience and embrace whatever comes from it. Yeah. But what's most important is that I know that if in a year or two I'm not feeling it and I'm not having the same experience of healing that I was having at the shoreline, all I have to do is pack up my stuff and move back. I know where it worked for me, and if I need to go back, I can always go back. But what I embrace in my life today is I prefer not to go back. I do prefer to always be stepping forward. Sometimes we do have to step back because sometimes, we have setbacks. But a setback doesn't mean that we throw in the towel or that we give up on our dreams, our desires, our truth. We just maybe have to adjust the approach. Yeah. And be open to doing that. Yeah. And know that no matter what comes of it, the greatest gift we get are the lessons. And that takes time to train ourselves to go, hey, what did I just learn from this moment? Even the painful ones. And we'll always have those opportunities to learn. It's when we don't ask that question that we miss the lesson. And then we're going to have to repeat it all over again with people, places, and things. So it takes practice to remember to ask yourself just that. What do I get to learn from this? Right now, it's almost become like I'm on autopilot with it. It's almost within minutes, I'll go, what's the lesson for me? What do I got to learn from this? Right. And a lot of times I don't like the lesson. We don't want to learn that lesson, right? Sometimes we resist it. Like, I didn't want to have to acknowledge that or learn that. A lot of people, actually, Jay, that's been incredible to me, learning that a lot of people don't want to learn the lessons. It's a significant amount of people that are actually not interested in facing this process of growth. Why do you think that is? Because it's painful. Because it's not easy. Obviously, it's extremely, extremely fulfilling on the other side, but the process is not an easy one. You have to really dig down and get dirty, One of our viewers said it earlier in our broadcast, and here's my answer. We get to show up and grow up. Yeah. It's simple, not easy. No. But that's really what it comes down to. Like, if we don't want to learn the lessons, then who's showing up? Exactly. Is it our older self? Is it our chronological age self, 34-year-old Jamie? Or is it 4-year-old Jamie that's showing up in that moment? I don't want to learn. Right? We have that temper tantrum. Right. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it's not, even as a 59-year-old or a 34-year-old. But that's where the blessings are. That's where the gifts are. 100%. That's where we get to really learn not how powerful we are, but we get to really embrace our superpowers. Totally. And, even in years like this one, there's so much opportunity for growth, so much opportunity for harvest in the coldest of winters, if you will. I'm getting actually ready in a few weeks to pack up my stuff and taking the show and taking my life over to Nashville, Tennessee. Just yeah. Whoa, congratulations. Thank you. I wasn't sure if you were going to disclose it on the show tonight. Yeah, but, that's amazing. Wow. Yeah, it's it just it came from all these processes that we're talking about. It's the logical step for my life, for growth, against fear, against disbeliefs.
It's like all these beliefs, like, oh my God, but I've been in Miami for 20 years. I know everybody here. I know the best people. I know the best doctors. I know the government people. Why would I leave? Well, it's taking all those risks and just keep moving forward, Jay.
I'm going to invite you to take a deep breath here on that. And I'm going to read what Sherry New says. She says, Jamie is much more mature at his age than most 34-year-olds. And why did you first laugh? What came up for you in that moment, Jamie?
Just thought, no, it's just not, it's nice to hear. Thank you.
Yeah.
Gary. Yeah.
Well, I affirm that you are an absolutely beautiful man who's seeking. And I love that. I love that you're open and you have definitely more years of wisdom under your belt than 34 years. And Sherry says she has a 33-year-old son, so she's looking at contrast maybe or comparison, which, we tend to do that. But where I'd like to go with you in this moment, Jamie, is Nashville, Tennessee. You've spent 20 years in Miami. 2 questions. Well, the first one is, how long did it take you to have the courage to break the news to your mom and dad, who I'm sure, having that heritage and culture that you grew up in, you probably had some concerns, worries, anxieties, fears, any of that bubble up for you?
Yeah, of course, that was in my mind. But this time, it just felt. I think I was in Nashville recently. I visited. I saw our good friend Jeff Fasano, and I saw a bunch of other people, and it just felt like right. It just felt perfect. It just felt like there was no reason why not to take the risk. So it just felt like it was the right time, and I sat down with my mom and I said, Mom, like, I'm going to Nashville, Tennessee. This is why, the show's taking off, the things are happening, and it's the right place for me. It's the right place. It's a good city. 100 people are moving there every day. There's good jobs. There's good, it's a thriving place, but it still has like a nice feel, a nice communal feel. And I'm doing this, and like, you're welcome to be on my journey. And I think that she saw in my eyes like a different kind of tone and certainty. And now, they're fully supportive of it. It's been a beautiful thing, Jay. So
wow,
yeah,
beautiful. How did any concerns from your mom or dad or friends, siblings, if you have any, regarding COVID and what the move would be like navigating through that? Did that come up for anybody at all?
It's actually just kind of come up today with the logistics of the move. Like, it's not to stop me from doing it, but more like, be careful with like the logistics part. But the COVID, in a way, Jay, I see it. Obviously, the health part is there, but the COVID is also. I mean, and I hope everyone watching, and I hope everyone has realized that life is so fickle, and we're always living in time zones, whether it's, oh, I should have done this 5 years ago, or, oh, I want to be this tomorrow. I'm going to quit smoking cigarettes tomorrow. But we don't live in the present. We're always living in time zones because the present is too painful. Okay, but if you live in the present and you have this opportunity, COVID is an opportunity. It's an opportunity of transformation. It's an opportunity of realizing that life is one, that life is beautiful, and that if you're wasting time with something that you're not, with not your purpose, then like, look, life can change in an instant with a virus from China or whatever. So in a way, COVID was part of like my motivating factor. Like, absolutely, this is the right time to do it.
Beautiful. Any fears come up for you that you're open to sharing in this moment about the move?
Yeah, sure. I mean, like I'm a human being, so am I gonna make friends? Am I gonna find the right person to share my life with, like a partner that I eventually want to find? Am I going to continue growing my podcast from over there? Fears, absolutely.
Okay. How do you manage them when they come up?
I mean, I acknowledge them. and I say, okay, like, let's go. Let's try to prove you wrong. I remember I once saw that a fear is like, it's like, imagine like someone is giving you like the pulse, like a strong hand pulse,
Yeah.
right? And if you let fear beat you, then fear is gonna just push your hand down. But if you learn how to use the force properly of fear, you can learn how to dance with it. You can learn how to tango.
Yeah.
So I think that's it. It's knowing it's gonna be there. You just gotta learn how to tango with it.
Beautiful. Yeah. My experience with fear is much of the time when the fear comes up, it's my younger self that's within me that's scared, that's fearful. And it's an opportunity for me to acknowledge it, but not give myself permission to stay in it or live in it. And understand. And once I have the awareness that, okay, here it comes, this is what I'm thinking or fearing. What I know today is that I can ask myself a simple question. And the question is it true? And the answer is always no, because it hasn't happened yet. It's just a story, what I refer to as something in the future or a future trip that may or may not happen. So why invest any more of my energy or time or thoughts pondering or sitting in it and taking me out of the gift of this moment, the present?
Mm.
So every time, as you navigate over the next 2 or 3 weeks, heading out to Nashville, as soon as if something pops up for you, I invite you to give it a try and just say, is this true? That's just a reminder that it's not true, because it's just a projection of something that may or may not happen. And then to be willing to accept the idea that if it was to happen, what's the lesson that I'm supposed to learn about myself? And it really will help to reduce some of that fight or flight that we can ignite pretty quickly in our body.
Yeah.
Like a raging fire.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Well, with what time we have left, Jamie, what I'd like to do is kind of come back to your podcast right now. If people want to learn more about your podcast or watch it, they could catch it. I've got it coming across the streaming banner, JRodconcerts podcast.com. They also could catch you on your Instagram page. It's also the same address. Is that right? JRod Concert Podcast. Mm-hmm. Concert Podcast. And before we go, I'd like to invite you to share with me, as a host of the show, what was, of all the people you've interviewed, of all the musicians and people in the entertainment industry, anybody show up that surprised you with something that they said that you didn't know before about them, or about yourself even in that moment?
Wow. Definitely, Jay. So many. I mean, look, I can start with you, right? Because you were one of our esteemed guests. Great episode, and you taught us so much about how the truth is within ourselves, not in a pharmaceutical, not in anything external, but I mean, I learned something from every guest, honestly. But there's parallels, and a lot of the people that have left a mark in music or in the arts or whatever, there are people that have taken risks. There are people that are disciplined in their fields. I've also had, whether it's comedians, I had a comedian yesterday or whatever. It's whatever you want to do. Even if you're like a virtuoso, you still gotta. Even if you're Eddie Van Halen, you still gotta put in the hours. You still have to. You can't skip the practice. The boring stuff that nobody sees. Whatever you do. So these are things that I'm like, patterns that I'm finding. But yeah. I mean, a lot. You learn something from everybody, Jay. Mm-hmm.
Where do you think you go from here? Now, this is a question I'm asking about the future, obviously, but if I gave you permission to dream right now, what would you like to see happen for you in 2021?
Yeah, yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think that I would like to see the podcast continue to grow its audience. I think it's in a really explosive kind of like growth phase right now, almost like overwhelming sometimes. But I'm riding the wave. I know that we've had a couple of major podcast kind of networks asking maybe if tantalizing the idea of our show joining their network. So it could be something like that, or it could be, or but expanding the audience in one way, and then probably by being in Nashville, I would like to get more in touch with the community there and with the Americana Music Association and with a lot of people, and try to get more exclusive content as well to the audience. Besides the great interviews that we do, like the ones that you always do, for example, Jay, yeah, like maybe try to leverage to get some unique angles that you won't find anywhere else now that we're there on the ground.
Are you yourself a musician? Do you play an instrument?
I dabbled with piano growing up, and I still kind of do, but dabbling is the way. I stopped practicing seriously when I was in my teens. Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we're just about at the hour. We are at the hour right now. I'd like to just take a moment, Jamie, to thank you for joining me this evening on Real People, Real Stories Live. I've enjoyed our time together, and I am so excited for you. I'm one of your biggest fans. I will continue to be your cheerleader and be here for you as you step into 2021 in Nashville, Tennessee, and enjoy the ride. You deserve it.
You, Jay. Thank you. And before we go, like same with you and Real Men Real Talk Live. Like, that's a heck of a show that you're doing, and I commend you for it. And also, really, really proud of you and the lives you're changing with it.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Jamie Rodriguez joining us from Miami, Florida tonight, soon heading to Nashville, Tennessee to begin his next part of his life journey as a podcaster of JRodconcerts podcast.com. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Jay. Appreciate it.
And by the way, viewers, thanks for joining us and staying with us. I really appreciate the support. I invite you to please share it out on your homepage. If you enjoyed it, share it with your friends and family. We'll catch you guys next time on Real People, Real Stories Live. Thank you.